Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Happy Monday, Dr. Paul.
Well, very good. I want to first say a thank you to our live listeners, to all our viewers, but especially those ones that tune in and listen to it live. We live, the country's in different time zones, and we don't expect everybody to, and that's the neat thing about these programs. They can tune in anytime they want. But the live viewers are special because they're there and they communicate with us more. So welcome to the program today. Today we want to talk about foreign policy, and because it was the most important issue over the weekend, and I'm only kidding, because nobody cared about foreign policy on the weekend. They were talking about a football game, and that was a distraction. To me, that's a mixed blessing. To me, that's sort of burying your head from the events of the world. But then again, it's pretty neat that we can still do that, that people can get together. And so far, I don't hear of any violence at the football game, and there were no guns and no shooting. So it probably turned out to be an interesting game. I understand that a lot of people had a lot of fun there. We want to talk about foreign policy in a more serious manner, and I wanted to have a takeoff from an article I saw on anti-war today, and the title caught my attention, and I know you saw it as well, and it says, Trump's foreign policy, Obama's third term, Bush's fifth term. Very interesting. You already know what the theme is going to be, and they didn't even put a question mark there. They're saying that, of course, that Trump is doing the same thing. And I divide the world sometime in two categories, libertarian and authoritarian. And then on foreign policy, it's intervention or non-intervention. And guess what? I think we have an interventionist foreign policy. In studying recently more about what happened 100 years ago with the Spanish-American War, we were en route to an empire back then. We continue to be. We have an empire. And I've also argued the case, especially when I was in office and running, that there are no differences between the two parties. They both believe in intervention. They both really believe in empire. And unfortunately, I think the majority of the American people believe in empire when it's presented to them on a platter and the necessity of them scared to death. The war propagandists changed the attitudes about going to war in Iraq. But I don't think that's the real beliefs of the American people. I think most people in America, I think most civilians, individuals around the world are for peace, but they get driven into these things where we have to fight them. There's a Hitler out there, and we got to stop him. And there's weapons of mass destruction. And so I have come to the conclusion that the foreign policy is bipartisan. It never changes, which annoys some of our libertarian friends because give them an edge, and I try to, but this article just reinforces my fear that the policy really hasn't changed all that much, that we're doing the same thing. And I think we don't have that much to go on. We always want to give Trump the benefit of the doubt in hopes he moves along where he makes a few good statements. But evidently, he's had just a couple weeks now, so we get a hint a little bit about what he's up to.
Yeah, and it is early on, and we still have hope, but it seems like he's surrounded himself with a very aggressive foreign policy team. And this is a piece that Bob Wenzel put up at Target Liberty, and he pointed out a few things that tend to underscore what anti-war said. The drone strikes continue under Trump unabated. Matter of fact, during the first 3 days of Trump administration, they launched 99 airstrikes on Syria and Iraq. 99. On February the 2nd alone, 41 strikes and 64 engagements. Drone strikes continue. Navy SEALs killed dozens of civilians on the ground in Yemen. Escalation in Syria. Safe zones. That's no-fly zones, essentially. And then repeating Obama's policy on Ukraine, which is something new and it flies in the face of the whole idea that we're having better relations with Russia. Trump's ambassador to the UN said that there will be no end to these sanctions unless Ukraine gives Crimea unless Russia gives Crimea back to Ukraine. So this really suggests that it's a continuation.
You know, he gets accused, and I do it at times, that he flip-flops. He'll say one thing about NATO and something differently. But I'll tell you what, his aggressive nature dealing with anybody who is a potential terrorist. It's not a proven terrorist. It's somebody who's been suspected of participating in it, even if they're an American citizen. We got to root them out no matter where. So he was very strong in the campaign. He's been very strong. He has a lot of military people in his administration. So it shouldn't surprise us, really. Even though we had hoped it would be a different foreign policy, I think it's more of the same. And if you go by, what the foreign policy was under Obama, how many bombs last year? 26,000. But guess what? That report came out today that said, or at least over the weekend, that they don't even count them all.
Yeah.
And nobody knows how many there are. So I would not expect all of a sudden that our military people are, under the new administration, going to be counting all the bombs. Because, someday some people might wake up in this country. How much does every bomb cost? How much? There's a lot of money involved. And maybe they'll start to realize that, military spending and maintaining an empire undermines two things: the financial conditions of our country and the civil liberties of our people. That's always what happens when you have a strong military and perpetual war. We have bases and troops in 120, 130, but there's 80 where they're actively active troops. And of course our CIA, we're not even allowed to know what's going on. And the CIA is not going to be a pussycat. From what I can tell. And they're going to be working with these special forces that are all over the place. So even if you have one person who wants to get a handle of this, it is not going to be easy to know what the CIA is going to be doing. But the truth is they're very much engaged. I just wish there were a greater incentive for the American people to demand what we're doing and separate the two. Just military spending doesn't give us national defense. And there's a few people I thought was demonstrated quite clearly of what we're up against when we argue our case on a couple senators going to Ukraine and stirring up trouble. Most of the people in America figure, well, that was 2 years ago. Yeah, maybe there was a controversy and we helped overthrow a bad guy because he liked Russia, but things are okay now. But it doesn't look like it's okay. What were these guys doing over there?
Yeah, this is interesting because, all of a sudden, out of the blue, as I said, we have this aggressive tone taken by the Trump administration toward Russia because there has been fighting that started up again. But that fighting started up again when the Kiev, the government we put in power, started shooting against the separatists in the east. And you say, well, how did this come out of the blue? Well, it didn't come out of the blue. Very interesting. As you point out, two senators, McCain and Lindsey Graham, they were in Ukraine on the front lines on the 2nd of January, egging them on to start attacking. We actually have a clip here, if we could put it up, of them actually doing this.
I admire the fact that you will fight for your homeland. Your fight is our fight. 2017 will be the year of offense. All of us will go back to Washington and we will push the case against Russia.
Ми всі повернемося до Вашингтону і ми будемо відстоювати санкції проти Росії.
Enough of a Russian aggression.
So there you have him telling the troops, go on the offensive. And that's exactly what they did.
It doesn't even hint of non-intervention. It hints of, expanding the empire, maintaining the empire, and with no qualms about doing it. It's done in this authoritarian sense that they have the moral high ground to do this. And that for some reason, if you don't support this type of attitude for us to be around the world, even though the rhetoric in the proposals may be different, just think of the rhetoric for Obama. as he was running for office, he said, well, I wasn't for this Iraq war. Maybe we should pay more attention to Afghanistan, which he did, but it didn't solve the problems in Iraq. But what about George Bush when he ran? It was the same story. You know, we needed a humble foreign policy. We needed to talk to people. We weren't the world's policemen. So they feed that to one group, and it's so easy to listen to because you want them to do that. And I was hopeful each time. And I've been hopeful with every administration that maybe. But right now, I'm searching desperately for any information or policies that might show that we're disengaging a little bit. Safe zones. I mean, this means in Syria, I think this is very, very dangerous, and a lot of military people have recognized this, and yet they're going to do this, and there are millions of people involved. How many people are you going to gather up and put them in the safe zone? Then how are you going to defend them, and who's going to be the defenders when you have about 4 factions over there? You know, who's going to run the safe zones, and will there be an accident? So that kind of stuff is just escalation, and of course very costly.
And you pointed out before the show, and it's an interesting. You'd read somewhere that President Trump tends to repeat what he just heard the person before him say, and I think that was pretty evident on Iran over the week, because earlier in the week you had National Security Advisor Michael Flynn saying that Iran is the #1 sponsor of terrorism in the world, the greatest threat. We're putting them on notice, and then a couple of days later, the Secretary of Defense Mattis said the same thing. Iran is the single biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. And so then you had Trump coming on O'Reilly's show the next day, and he said, Iran is the #1 terrorist state. They are sending money all over the place and weapons. Now, good thing we don't do that. But if you unpack that for a second, Iran has no links to ISIS or Al-Qaeda. They're mortal enemies of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Iran is actually fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria and Iraq. And even more than that, there are de facto allies fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Iraq and in Syria. So where does he get this idea that somehow they're causing destabilization and terrorism when they're fighting the people that we've said are the worst terrorists?
What doesn't make sense is if they had those goals, to do such and such, they never work. What were their goals in Iraq? Well, it was Israel liked what we were doing, and we were going to undermine them and get rid of this monster, this threat. And yet he was anti-Islamist, ISIS. And he maintained order, not the way it should be done, but there was an order. And they more or less created a Shia state that now is allied with Iran. So it makes no sense. But, Trump, you talk about hearing one thing and doing another. He's been pretty consistent in being very, very pro-Israel. I mean, he called Netanyahu, right after the elections, and there's nothing wrong with being friends, obviously.
Sure.
But then the other day, when there were some building, in the settlements and taking away more land from the Palestinians, then Trump says, that's not a good idea. That doesn't work well for peace. But then again, that really doesn't fit the bill, because as soon as you talk about neutrality and a balanced approach, that's not considered the right thing to say when you're dealing with the Middle East. But then again, it was back doing something else. But I think one of the most inconsistent things here that really is a bother is, the 7 countries that we denied entry into the United States. There was, potential people coming. Why not check these people that are coming from these countries? Yeah. But they didn't put the country that should be most watched, and that's Saudi Arabia. But we're bosom buddies of Saudi Arabia. We help them bomb and kill people in Yemen, and of course this is just aggravates things to no end. I just don't understand. The inconsistency doesn't bother them one bit. Punish them, yell and scream at them, but look at the reality. To me, it's utterly amazing that the Congress unanimously voted to say that if you were a relative of somebody that was killed on 9/11, you have the right to sue the Saudi government. Yeah. Who knows what will come of that. But the sentiment is so strong that nobody took a position, why do that? The Saudis, why do this? They meant that Saudi probably had something to do with it, and yet they're still our best friends, you know.
Yeah, and this goes with talking to people and doing something that they tell you. Just before all of this onslaught on Iran, or during it, he had a phone call with the King of Saudi Arabia. As you point out, he's been very close to Israel. Both these countries have number one on their list to overthrow the Iranian government. So it sounds like he's been accused of doing the bidding of Putin, but I would suggest he's probably doing the bidding of King Salman and Netanyahu more than anything else.
I want to go back to this title again to make the point again, because the title was Trump's foreign policy, Obama's third term, Bush's fifth term, which means it never changes. And that's been my argument. There we have way too much bipartisanship. And even with an individual coming into the presidency that is very, very independent-minded, at least in the rhetoric and representing something new and different, and a revolutionary in administration and politically maybe, but not in philosophy. I think the revolution has to be philosophic. There has to be a change in attitude. You can change administrations from here to kingdom come, and it's not going to happen if they all believe that it's our duty, you know, to police the world because they need us and we take care of them. And then there's also this thing, when you blow up a country, a lot of people suffer from it. And that means we have a moral responsibility. They called me on that in the presidential case. Don't we have a moral responsibility to take care of the people that we hurt? So that's their argument for bringing more people into this country. So it's on and on. It never stops because of the philosophy of non-intervention, which is more than 100 years old in this country, and we have followed it. And there was one time more debates on this, but today it isn't. You know, it's who should we bomb, and who can we ignore, and they just go on. And most of the time, it's designed for the American people to be held, in ignorance, and we can't tell them everything. You can't tell how much money is being lost by the Pentagon. You can't tell them what the Pentagon is doing. You can't tell them how many bombs really fall. You just pour out this information, and most people don't even care. They don't even know where these places are. So I think what we need in the country is a philosophic revolution where the attitudes are changed and people are forced to think about what should the role of government be. And our founders tried very desperately to have a very limited role in protecting liberty and not running the world. But right now, too many people accept the idea that, well, that's a lost cause. That was old-fashioned, and we need an activist. We need an imperial president who's tough and strong. We want strength and that can be, take care of things and move the troops around. So I think the troops are going to continue. I think that you mentioned about your concern that maybe there would be a hot war against Iran. I was a little bit more optimistic that it was not about to happen, but the way we're going, there's going to be some major problems develop, because if we get too tough on Iran, then something's going to change with Russia. But the good news came out of this recent threat of maybe getting into a real war with Iran was a lot of American business people have new customers. Iran's selling oil. They have money, and they're buying stuff from us. This is the old theory, and that's why we're not as likely to get into a shooting war with China. We need trade. That's why I don't like to see the new element morphed in here, which is different than Bush and different than Obama, of protectionism. That is a danger signal.
Yeah, and the idea, the accusation is, well, you're isolationist, you don't want us to be everywhere. But on the contrary, the state shouldn't be the main actor in foreign affairs. It should be individuals. And, leaving on a bright note, here's someone who gets it. Here's the great businessman Jack Ma, the great Chinese billionaire, and he understands. And this is a great quote that I saw. He was opening up some new companies in Australia and New Zealand, and this is what he said when he was over there. If trade stops, war starts. We have to actively prove that trade helps people to communicate. Trade is about the trade of values and the trade of culture. That's it.
Yes, and I think it might have been Mises or one like him that said, when goods fail to cross borders, armies do. And that, of course, is what we're all about here on this channel, as well as with the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity, because the goal is peace and prosperity. They go together. You have peace, you're going to have a lot more prosperity, and you will have more liberty. But it's the liberty that promotes the peace and prosperity. We once held that as our highest ideal, but now American exceptionalism is intertwined with a militaristic approach that we are the dominant factor around the world. That is dangerous. It's going to change because we cannot maintain this empire. And then, maybe then, we can restore the greatness of America, where the emphasis is on liberty. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.